Hello, everybody. Welcome to another video from the Powerbomb Project. I am one of your hosts, Daniel, joined by my other two co-hosts.
It's Berman.
Chris.
So we've never done a video about music on the channel. We wanted to switch it up, and music is one of my biggest passions. And yeah, I figure why not do a top 10 albums of 2022 video. There were some good albums. There were some shit albums. And before we begin, I'm going to give a special dishonorable mention to the worst album of 2022. Uno the Activist 3. Which album? Any of them. This, literally, Playboy Cardi was bad enough. But his cousin is even worse. Absolute dog shit. If you want to listen to dog shit for an hour plus, just search Uno the Activist and you'll be satisfied with all the shit in your mouth. Anyways.
Damn, we're not getting monetized.
Yeah, we're not.
Oh.
Well, let's begin, people. Coming in at number 10. I Prevail, True Power. So the genres are post-hardcore, hard rock, metalcore, and new metal. So I personally don't like a lot of modern rock. I grew up with Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Avenged Sevenfold, a lot of, great bands in my personal opinion. So I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff about the genre today I'm just not a fan of. But I Prevail are one of the few bands that can really impress me. And honestly, there are just so many good tracks on here. There's Fear and Letting Go, which is the second track on the album. Technically the first, because the first track is, less than a minute, and it's kind of just like a little intro. But that would be my highlight track of this album. Just a great hard rock album if you guys want to go out of your way and listen to that. Overall rating, 8 out of 10.
Yeah. And then on my list, my number 10 is Disturbed Division. I love the album. It's fun to listen to. I love Disturbed. They have been doing a lot of emotional songs. And this song in this album has a lot of nice sound to it. And it deserves to be on this. Hey You, nice song to have on there. It's single first, but on there it just sounds great. So for me, definitely 8 out of 10 for this one.
And then for my pick for number 10 was Ozzy Osbourne's Patient number 9. Now, granted, it's not my favorite Ozzy project, but to be fair, the man is probably most likely in his 70s by now, so this album is more instrumentals than anything. But there are a few good tracks that stand out significantly, so it's not a waste of time. It's kind of classic Ozzy, I expect, just old school rock. But out of all the tracks I've really enjoyed, is one of those days. It's just dark, depressing, and it's just overall, it's just Ozzy doing his thing, bro. Like I'm glad we got the new Ozzy album, but then again, I'm just like, if you weren't really gonna sing, like, could have just made this into an LP. But hey, I'm not complaining. I got a pretty decent album, so yeah.
Uh,
All right, coming in at number 9, Joey Badass 2000. If you guys just love some nice East Coast hip hop and jazz rap, go ahead and listen to this album. There are a lot of amazing tracks on this album. Make Me Feel is probably the highlight track for me off of this album. There's not too much I could really say about the project besides it's just great. There's a lot of bars. Is it Joey Badass's best project? Probably not, but it's definitely a standout one for him. Overall, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
and then for me, I have the number for 9. I have Ozzy Osbourne, Patient number 9. I just have a little higher because I do love Ozzy, and it do sucks that we don't hear that much of his voice that much. But I just feel sound. It just sounds a lot. It sounds nice to hear his voice and saying that he's okay, more or less, from what his developments he's doing at home right now. So I love Ozzy, so that's why I put him out here. All these songs are great. I would say definitely I would say 8 out of 10 for me.
And at my number 9, I have the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Return of Dreamland. And funny thing too, because I was talking to Berman earlier before this recording, like I didn't know the Red Hot Chili Peppers were still a thing. I mean, the last album I listened to them by was probably Californication, like when I was in middle school. But surprisingly, they still make bangers. Like there's just something that about them that makes them nostalgia. But this album is very tripping than their usual stuff, and it's just kind of very experimental from like their last album they made. Because there was two released this year, but I prefer Dreamland just slightly better, just because we got one of the best new Red Hot Chili Peppers songs in a while, named Eddie, which if you haven't listened to it, it's literally one of the best songs they make. You can even compare it to the earlier stuff when they started as a band. I highly recommend it. Not much else I can say. Take it away, Daniel.
All right, number 8. One of the most popular albums of the year, The Weeknd's Dawn FM. Man, a lot of people may like to make the argument that this isn't The Weeknd's best project, and it might not be but that's only because The Weeknd has made so many outstanding projects as it is. The trilogy, Kissland, After Hours. He's already made so much amazing work. So, this doesn't have to be on that level. I'm not asking for 9 out of 10s or 10 out of 10s from The Weeknd every time. He can put out an album like this, and it is still great. Maybe the Tyler the Creator and not Kanye, Lil Wayne features could have been taken off. I wish it was Kanye because Lil Wayne was ugh. But anyways, maybe not Kanye right now because of everything going on. But you guys get the point. You guys get the point.
He's just being crazy.
Yeah, he'll be normal again in 2023. Don't worry, people. So this is what I'll say though. This is an absolutely great synth pop album with some 80s elements and disco elements and dance elements. Just an absolutely great project. And having Jim Carrey as this sort of narrator through the project is just great. And yeah, again, outside of the future tracks, I feel like this album is great. Overall, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. The standout track for me would be Sacrificer Out of Time. I can't quite decide because both those tracks are just incredible tracks.
And for me, on my number 8, I'm going to go for Parkway Drive, Darker Still. This is a great rock band, very heavy rock, a lot of screaming, growling more or less, but I still love how they sound. They're very like gothic. You can have kind of sound to it, but they're like more church sound too. I just love how they sound, and the standout probably would be Glitch or Greatest Fear. It just sounds great. You can listen to it, and it probably never get old. It just sounds nice, and definitely gotta give this an 8.5 out of 10 for me.
And then for my spot, it's gonna be Slipknot the end so far. Like I haven't really been the biggest Slipknot fan in like the longest time. Like recently got into them just because of this album itself. Like I know a lot of people say it's like it's not the greatest, but I think it's a pretty good introduction of like the modern times what Slipknot has to offer. Just for the fact that every single track it's pretty good. It shows off the best of the guys, and if anything, I think the one song that kind of sold me into them becoming a fan was definitely Hive Mind, because that song was literally just like about ants and just about queens or what have you, or the concept of it. It just absolutely insane. Not a single dull moment at all in this album. Listen to this all the time when I'm at the gym or playing video games or what have you. It's a really good album. So Slipknot and so far. And so forth. There we go.
All right, number 7, Boldy James and Real Bad Man, Killing Nothing. This is an amazing rap album. That's really all I could say. Just a bunch of bars on here, tracks with some, deep messages as well. Overall, Boldy James is an underground artist, but don't get it twisted. He can go toe to toe with just about anybody in the game when it comes down to the pen. And that's all I could really say about this project. This is a 9 out of 10. It might not be my absolute favorite Boldy James project. That would still be 2020's. Let me see if I could find it. Megron and Nicholas. That is still my favorite album from him. But this is another amazing project from him, probably my second favorite. So 9 out of 10. The standout track overall for this album, it would be tough to say, but I'm actually going to go Game Time.
Yeah, and for me, on my number 7 will be I Prevail, The True Power. Danny had this on number 10. I put this on number 7 because I love the sound. They're a standout in a lot of that rock. Uh, in these days. And right now, like, they're always maybe they mention our number top five, and this shows why they are. It sounds great. Every song is great too. Probably stand out to me, Body Bags and Judgment Day. Those two sound great. I always love them, and I've waited for a long time. So definitely 9.5 out, 9, yeah, 9 out of 10 for me.
Awesome. And then for number 7 on my list, I have the Suicide Boys "Cry Me a Lullaby." Now, this isn't one of like their longest projects, mind you, but it's definitely a standout as of the recent times of the guys finally grouping up together because they did have a falling out in the beginning where eventually, I believe, I forget the name of one of the artists, but they threatened to leave because of their overdosing drugs or whatever. They're getting too into it.
So yeah, basically what happened was back in 2019, both of these guys were in bad shape, basically mentally, based off how many drugs they were taking. They both went to rehab, and basically they're both sober today. Well, one of them only smokes weed, but the other is completely sober. And basically this whole album is kind of talking about the temptations of relapsing and all that, but avoiding them and overcoming their temptations.
Yeah. And just overall, it just kind of adds up to the message of the album, which kind of made it a little bit stronger. I mean, it's kind of funny too, seeing that they became super sober just for have like one of their top tracks called like 1,000 Blunts. But I know it's more of a joke than anything. But overall, it's a solid album. I can't really complain. And then the intro, she's Super Mario Brothers as the actual theme slaps pretty hard, so it's a good time.
Well, Chris just mentioned it at number 7, and ironically, that's my number 6 album.
Oh,
"Sing Me a Lullaby," my sweet temptation. Yes. Besides the little message it has behind it, I also just have to say this is probably the most fun I've had listening to any album this year. Whether it's just driving around town, playing video games, or going to the gym, or just really just I've probably listened to this album so goddamn much this year. It's crazy. Definitely, in my opinion, the best project the Suicide Boys have ever done. This is probably, one of their most meaningful projects as well, I can confidently say. And yeah, like Chris said, it's using the Super Mario World sample in the beginning. There's also the Biggie Smalls, Suicidal Thoughts sample in the album as well. All the samples on this album are fucking incredible. The production on this album is easily top notch. And that's what made this album stand out so much. And yes, on the track "1,000 Blunts," Ruby, I believe, is talking about the temptation of being at a party and how there's Xanax at the table and how he, has to avoid the Xanax at the table. Just kind of goes along with the whole album. So yeah, overall, the standout track would be, of course, the intro with the Super Mario World sample. Jenny, I'm a fucking retard. Genius. So overall, 9 out of 10 project. And yeah, sorry for the fact I can't speak English, people. But yeah, moving on to Berman's number 6.
Yeah, and my number 6 is the Motionless in White, scoring the end of the world. It's a brilliant and a masterpiece of a album. And funny enough, there's a song on that masterpiece, which is probably one of the best on that album. And there's probably another one called Cyberhex. That's a great album, great song too. Motionless in White does it so great that the Chris Motionless, the lead singer, just does it the right way. And it's just the emotion, the emotional song. Every song tells a story, and it's great storytelling with this whole thing. So for me, I always gotta give props to Chris Motionless on this. I love him. This band is so good too. So definitely a 9. Yeah, 9 out of 10 for me.
and then for my number 6, I have a band called Off, aka this is the name of the album YouTube, so it's not illegal. It's called Free LSD, and basically this is your. I would say it's a very good throwback to like punk stuff like in the '90s because this album takes less than 20 minutes to finish, but the whole concept itself is pretty insane. Seeing that these guys are basically just singing about like all these conspiracy theories or like well known like facts or whatever you, and kind of like a creative punky kind of style. Like it's something you would see from like the early '90s, like I said before, like maybe something you listen to Tony Hawk Underground 2. It's very enjoyable. It only takes 20 minutes to listen to the entirety of the album, and they also had a feature with Jack Black in one of the short films in the previous albums. And if you just want to get a good taste, their stand-up track is called "War Above Los Angeles," which is a real thing that happened, mind you, where the government actually thought there was UFOs invading the United States, and they indeed like started shooting at the sky because they were being invaded. And they talk about this in the song too, in less than 2 minutes, but they make it catchy, fun. It's well worth your time. Go out and listen to them.
All right. Number 5, Freddie Gibbs, Soul Sold Separately. Now, how I became a Freddie Gibbs fan by discovering him back in 2020, thanks to the big project that blew up, Alfredo, which featured artists like Tyler the Creator, Rick Ross, and was produced by The Alchemist. And overall, it ended up becoming one of the best hip hop albums I've ever listened to. And, you know, it inspired me to go listen to his other projects like Pinata and Bandana. And, you know, they're amazing projects. They are genuinely amazing projects. And Freddie Gibbs is one of the best rappers around today, which is why it doesn't shock me that the narrative has not changed one bit when it comes to the album Sold Separately. Unfortunately, this is going to be Freddie's last album as, you know, a full-blown rapper, as he's getting more into, like, you know, directing and films, it seems like, but which is great. And, you know, I'm excited to see how he does in that world as well. But yeah, this is like his last like ambitious project, I'd like to call it. And, you know, it has a lot of bangers, but also a lot of personal tracks as well, you know, like Grandma's Stove, Gold Rings, CIA, Crack Instagram, and shit. Just like, damn, Crack Instagram and AIDS, I think it was. Just overall, though, amazing project, man. 9 out of 10. My standout song is PYS, and also the cameo from Joe Rogan is crazy. All the features on this record from GJ Paul, Pusha T, Anderson .Paak, Raekwon, Rick Ross, like everyone delivers on this album. Everyone delivers on this album, but Freddie Gibbs does especially. That is easily worthy of being in my top 5, 100%.
Yeah, and my number 5 is Slipknot, The End So Far. It is a great band. Chris had it before. I'm having it at number 5 because I do love this song. This album is great. The best songs. Hive Mind's definitely one of them. The other one I like is Medicine for the Dead. I just like how that sound, and it sounded great too. I just always love them, and I can't say anything more about because Slipknot is the OG heavy metal band, and everyone thinks about. So I gotta give this a 9 out of 10.
And then for my spot, it's gonna be. I'm not even kidding. The band is called The Garden, but the album is called Horseshit Route 66. And I know that sounds really stupid because it is stupid. Like this is one of the most dumbest punk rock albums I've listened to in a very long time. But that's what kind of makes it great because this band it actually delivers like the singing, the beats, everything, the guitar work. It's absolutely perfect, and it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And that's kind of like how their whole shtick is right now as the Garden. Like it's just fun. Like you can't take it way too seriously. It takes again 20 minutes to finish the entirety. It's very funny, and the standout track is of course the title of itself, Route 66. So listen to it. It's not a waste of time. You get a good laugh at it. So that's why I put it at my number 5.
So now these next 3 entries, numbers 2 through 4, all practically have very similar messages and meanings within these albums. And that is about confronting yourself, confronting the worst parts about yourself, you know, your mental state, talking about, like, you know, some of the wrong you did, but also some of the wrong that has happened to you, and just learning how to move from it all and just continue how to grow as a human being. That's what these next 3 albums on this list are about. So the first one about that subject is Denzel Curry, Melt My Eyes, See Your Future. Now, this is just an outstanding record from Denzel Curry. Either this or Taboo, I am still having a tough time deciding what his best project is, you know? But they both are the best for different reasons. I'm going to explain what this album is the best at. This album is his most mature in terms of lyricism, easily, without a doubt. a lot of the songs have these chill vibes behind it. But at the same time, there are some absolute bangers on here. Walkin' is probably one of the best songs of 2022, without a shadow of a doubt. Melt Session, number one, was an absolutely outstanding intro. You also got The Last, you got Mental, you got Troubles, Ain't No Way. There are so many excellent tracks from Denzel on here. And you could just, you can just feel the maturity from Denzel compared to this past record. Because on past records, he's always kind of screaming to get his point across. And on this record, he's learned how to, he's learned from that. He knows how to get his point across without having to scream all the time. And that is honestly a cool thing. But yeah, this is just an outstanding record. The overall best song off the record for me personally would go to X-Wing. X-Wing ended up being my number one song on Spotify in 2022, ironically enough, and that didn't surprise me because it was absolutely one of the standout songs this year. Overall, this project is a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, and for number 4 for me, I have Thousand Below. Hell finds you everywhere. This is similar to Danny's last one, where this talks about all the things that you gotta come towards, and makes sense with the name. Hell finds you everywhere. It means there's a lot of hardships that you go through in everywhere in your life, and every song talks about this, and that's why I love this band. This is a very lesser known band, but I think they just don't get recognized, and I think they are just so good to listen. And the best one out of the other, the nice featured one for me is Hell Find You Everywhere or Face to Face. Those two are very emotional and they have a really deep message. And I think it just is a great band. I love them. And for me, I definitely got to give this a 9.5 out of 10 for me.
And then for my pick, I picked Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Morale. And I'm not even gonna lie, Daniel. We've talked so many times about this artist that I've just hated every single project he's dropped, with the exception of maybe a few tracks. But this is definitely one of the best ones he's put out forever. Like there's not really a bad track in this album except like one that you can kind of question, which is "We Cried Together." But I get it. That's more of like a domestic abuse thing, but it kind of doesn't really belong to the album, which is like really random and it just kind of throws everything off. But the album itself, it's very good, just for the fact that Kendrick kind of goes in deep of what he's going through and like how his family like abandoned him for like who he chooses to date or whatever, which is really stupid and all the controversies he had to go through as like an artist. But it's probably one of his peak projects, and I think Anti Diaries is probably one of my favorites because it kind of talks about him like with his aunt, like or his no his was his uncle or his aunt? I
No,
forget.
you were right. You were right.
Okay, cool. I just don't want to get it incorrectly, but it basically talks about like somebody in his family, kind of transitioning and kind of how he grew up is like in the '90s and like the hood wouldn't really accept him, and he's just kind of trying to deal with it. Like I know it's kind of controversial take because he kind of just says faggot, faggot, faggot in the beginning of the song, which kind of like I get what he's coming from, but he didn't mean it like harmful way necessarily. It was just kind of like I guess just a strange way to think, but he saves the track pretty much going into more details and how he got close to his auntie or whatever. But I liked it. It was definitely my favorite project for Kendrick, and I can't wait to see what he has next.
All right. Number 3, JID, The Forever Story. Easily the best work he's ever done to date. That is definitely all I could say. I feel like he definitely outshined the rest of his double XL freshman list back in 2018 with his unforgettable Cypher freestyle. However, a lot of people couldn't get behind him because it didn't seem like he was able to find his artistry. He was an incredible rapper, but he didn't really know what to do artistically speaking. And that problem is officially solved on this album. And now that you combine the art with the rapping, JID is officially unstoppable now. And this is definitely one of the best projects all year. Easily at my number 3.
Yeah. And at my number 3, it's the oldie and goodie, Shine Down Planet Zero. It is a great album. It has a lot of nice introductions to each song that reminds you what the song could be about, kind of robotic. but it's so good. And most of them talk about you having no sleep, you're not thinking right, someone's about to save you. It's a great emotional song, a band, but I love them. And Shinedown's always a great band to listen to. My favorites are probably Planet Zero and Daylight. I think Daylight's the softest one, but I think it's so good to listen to. And it's up there always, and probably Shinedown's one of my all-time favorites bands out there. So I got give this always a 9.5 out of 10.
And then for my pick for number 3 is going to be Freddie Gibbs, Soul Separately. I know it was on Daniel's pick, but overall, it was a good comparison from his other album, Alfredo, with many of the features, but he didn't really need it for this case. And I guess my unsigning track would probably be the CIA, of just him talking about like how his friends got pretty much caught up in like the drug dealing or whatever. It's a very old school album. It's excellent. Not much else I can say. So that's my pick for number 3.
Number 2, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. So, if you've been a fan of Kendrick Lamar and you've listened to his projects from Section 80 to Good Kid, Mad City to Pimp a Butterfly to Damn to Mr. Morale, I'm not going to say they're all entirely connected, but if you kind of notice some things, in a way, it kind of is in the sense of Kendrick's life. If you go through the time he released To Pimp a Butterfly, a lot of people started to kind of look at him like a savior, but he's not. He's just an ordinary man. And that is something he expresses on this project. He admits to doing some things that he regrets doing in his life, but he's learned how to let go of that regret as well and move on from it, just like Denzel Curry and JID. And also, a lot of people like to say this album sucks because it's not Kendrick's best album. And this is what I'll say. It might not be Kendrick's very best album, but you cannot discount this album because this is fucking phenomenal. If this was from any other rapper, you could easily make the argument of this being their best album of all time. I can confidently say that. This album is just fantastic. And you just have so many standout tracks on this album. You got N95, you got Mr. Morale, which is probably my favorite track of the entire album. You got Father Time, you got Die Hard, you got Purple Hearts, which had that Ghostface feature, which even made it nice for me. Silent Hill is a banger. Count Me Out is a banger.
We Cried Together is a banger.
Savior is a banger. Nah, seriously though, that song is facts. That song is facts. Just for a lot of relationships, they shouldn't be, together in general. A lot of people that are together shouldn't be together. No offense to some of you. Break up with your partner. Anyways, all I could say is that this project is near perfect. The only reason I couldn't put it at my number 1 and give it a 10 out of 10 is because over time, Worldwide Steppers unfortunately kind of became a meme, and understandably so. And every time I go back to it, I can't really take the track as seriously as he's trying to make it out to be. Like you have the whole choir in the background, and he's like, "Oh no, I fucked a white woman," and it just kind of felt very corny after a while. And then the other thing I kind of thought about was how Mother I Sober was easily one of the most emotional and beautiful tracks Kendrick has ever done, and I thought it would have been the absolute perfect way to end the album. But with Mirror, I guess you have to kind of look at it all in the positive light and kind of end the album on the happy note. I get it, but part of me believes Mother I Sober should have been the closer. So for those 2 reasons alone, I can't put it at number 1. I am sorry, but number 2, still very high on this list, and rightfully so. 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah. And my number 2 is a Red Hot Chili Peppers Unlimited Love. We mentioned Red Hot Chili Peppers Dream, the second album right after this one. That's a great album, but I love Unlimited Love. It's great. Black Summer is a great sounding song. Music video is fun to listen to. And I just always love listening to it anytime. I just want to relax. Just so relaxing. and I can't stop saying anything about this. But Red Hot Chili Peppers is great. I think. Let's see, Black Summer's probably one of the number one on there. And there's I think every single song is great. I think there's so many I can't stop thinking. So I definitely gotta give this a 9.5. I can't put a number 10, number one, but I gotta give it to number 2 because of how good that sound is. So definitely 9.5 for me.
And then for my pick, it's gonna be Denzel Curry. Like Danny made a lot of good points, just saying it's overall Denzel's probably best project up to date. I think the last time we heard anything was Cloud Cobain. I think that was like the most major album he released so far. But
Yeah, Taboo was like his last super big release. He
there we
released a
go,
few other albums, but that was like the last huge release.
for sure. Oof. I got to confuse one with the tracks, but anywho, it's all good. Like no track is probably bad at all. I think probably the most kind of weirdest one. It's the one with Slow Tie, but that one's more experimental than anything. I know it wasn't your most like track in this album, Daniel, from what we were saying last time when we are discussing this. But
Yeah,
walking,
it was my least. It was the only track off the entire album that I haven't really gone back to like that.
true, but I can't complain. Walking's my personal favorite. It's good, but it's not gonna be number one because number one is number one, and it's a good reason why I put it there.
Coming in at number one, Quadeca, I Didn't Mean to Haunt You. Easily the most unique sounding album of the entire year. And honestly, this is the one of the most emotional albums I've heard probably ever, man. Like it's actually crazy. Quadeca didn't really post a lot for a year and a half because he took the time, on his craft with this project. And in the meantime of him making this project, unfortunately, one of his friends, Sad Frosty, passed away. And unfortunately, the passing of him kind of, it feels like in a weird way was kind of responded to through this album, even though that was never the intention. But, it's just a beautiful album, man. A beautiful, beautiful album. Just the perspective of a man who committed suicide, seeing his family move on without him getting absolutely depressed and angry, and feeling like he, you know, didn't really matter at all. But then you really start to go through the album, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It's just a great way of like looking at your overall life and just accepting everything for what it is and appreciate everything for what it is before it runs out. And that's what the message behind this album is. Again, so experimental. This is literally like 10 plus different genres. It is insane, and it's the most different sounding project I've probably ever heard. Overall, 10 out of 10. The only album that's getting a 10 out of 10 in this year.
And for me, my number one is the Architects Classic Symphony of a Broken Spirit. This is a emotional song too, but it's not super emotional, but it talks a lot about pretty much a broken person, broken human being. Every song has its thing. Architects is famous for doing more about drugs, talking about don't do drugs, talking bad sides about drugs, like the dark sides about it. It's so brutal how they talk about it. And every song talks about the drugs or in a broken spirit in a brutal way. And Tear Gas is probably a brutal one right there, talking about it. Or Defake, Spitbones, every single song talks about so much emotional things that go on in his life or another person's life. And that's why it's called this broken spirit, because you probably have everyone has a broken spirit in who is listening to these type of songs, and it helps them and makes them repair their spirit. So I think this is why I give this number one and probably one of the best rock bands and best rock albums of the year. It's number one. Architects, good job. 10 out of 10 for me.
And then, funny enough, me and Daniel share the same track or album, I should say, is Quadeca. It's probably again, it's very emotional. Before this, you were telling me that this guy was mostly known as mostly like as a rapper, like this
Yeah,
guy.
he was basically a YouTube rapper. He took in, not that he wasn't passionate about it, but compared to what he is now, it feels very amateur.
Exactly, and it's a good evolution because I think his West known track is what his diss with Jake Paul or his Wii Shop remix rap. which is pretty funny. But the album, it's beautiful. It's literally about just moving on to the afterlife and kind of accepting for your actions and kind of just try to move on. It's beautiful. Not much else I could say. And the only song that really stood out to me was definitely from Born Yesterday, because God damn it, that thing makes me teary every time I listen to it. But it's perfect. One of my favorites of
It
this
is.
year or last year, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Fractions of Infinity, one of the best songs I've ever heard, man. That's all I could say. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed our list. Feel free to mention some albums you all loved in the comments below. I've been Daniel.
I've been Berman.
And Chris.
Take it easy.